Mr. Rainwater.
Hey, Joe.
Trailer Park Warlock is a success. Can we call it that? Let's call it
I'll
like
call it
let's
that.
we'll call it what it is. It's a success. I don't know if it necessarily would hit the goals, whatever they may have been when you started. Um, I don't know if it hit them because I don't know what goals you set, if any. But I do know that 100,000 plus
Yeah.
subscribers is pretty. What's the word? I wanted to say mentionable. That's not the right word.
Yeah, it's mentionable. I kind of feel like here's my thing. So
It's
much of
notable.
modern it's
Notable. That's the
notable.
word. Yeah.
So much of modern day, I think modern day media, what's considered a successful title is like pretty ridiculous numbers.
Yeah.
You know, you look at a given big name YouTube streamer, it's like, or not streamer, but just like somebody who uploads stuff on YouTube. Somebody like Mr. Beast or PewDiePie or people like that. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
100 million. You know what I mean?
In 8 days. Like, yeah.
That kind of thing. I mean, it's one of those things where it puts everything into context, right? Because like your victory is somebody else's, just like whatever. It's not even. It doesn't even register
but
on
for
on.
but for you, would you would say Trailer Park Warlock is a success?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, it's the most successful thing I've ever worked on so
So
far.
so getting into tonight's topic, I have to ask you to out you from a conversation that we had off air. Why are you so like ready to be done? Why are you looking what's the expression a gift horse in the mouth, or you know what I mean, like you're climbing the mountain, like you've got a quite an accomplishment under your belt with it, and you're wrapping up. That's like
Right,
you've called it a day, right? Pretty much like you're
right.
putting the final touches on the final season.
Well, I got 13 episodes to go, but
Okay.
that's not that many, right? Comparatively, but like every episode feels harder than the last.
Wow.
And I think a lot of it has to do, for me, a lot of it is um make like I'm having, every time I get closer and closer to the end of the series. Actually, it's not 13, it's 16. But every episode I get close to the series, the more I have to kind of look back and make sure that in regards to all the continuity stuff, everything's clicking together.
Mm.
And um, that is sort of an overwhelming experience. And also, in order for me to sort of fit everything in together, each episode's sort of getting progressively longer too. So
Mm.
like I'm in this place where it really feels like it's ratcheting up more and more and more. And that has more to do with just like it's more of an issue with just like resource management. Because every
Okay.
episode becomes sort of like a a every episode is this precious resource that I cannot waste. And I would rather have like spare episodes than be in a position where like I'm running over, because then there's nothing I can do. Like I can't add on, you know. So I think it's just the pressure right now is just very, very difficult. And it's not like I'm definitely accepting the challenge full throttle, but I'm also in a place where like I can't. I kind of want to be. I want to be on a title, or I want to be working on a title in the future where there's not this kind of pressure in the same way, because it's I don't know, like it makes the creative process a little bit disorienting.
So you want to talk about you want to be the classic definition of canceled, where where you're just chugging along and then all of a sudden somebody else comes along and goes, "Yeah, it's not working out. We're done." And you don't have to worry about wrapping everything up in a bow. It's just like, "Oh, well, that was taken away from me. All right, on to the next thing." Like you feel like that's a better situation to be in?
I think what it is well, you know what it is like the way that I'm thinking about it now is I might have regrets about having turned this story into such an important continuity thing.
Hmm.
And just thinking about it in regards to whatever I do next, I want it to be more episodic in nature and be less. And I probably won't stick to that, but and have it be less like intense about like every episode sort of feeding into each other. I
Yeah.
think that's hard to do, and I know like for me the main reason why that's so hard to do is in a funny way like it's actually easier to write like a series because you can have episodes where so long as you progress the storyline you can kind of fuck around in the middle, and I haven't been doing it like that with Trailer Park Warlock, but like I know that I have done that in the past where like um I've had episodes where it's like, okay, I just need to move this thing along. I don't need to like necessarily make a joke or a gag or whatever. Um, I can kind of just. It's not. It sounds like what I'm trying to describe as coasting, and it's not really. I kind of did that for a little bit in season 2. I have to be really honest with myself. And that was the point at which my editor was like, "Yeah, we're gonna have to cancel the series because we're kind of dropping readers a lot." So that was a wake up call for me.
So you want to do something like that as your next project, even though in the past it wasn't working out.
No, I'm saying I want to write Friends. Like I want to write something that's like
Well, I mean, they had long term
they have
story.
long term storylines, but if something I don't know, like there's less
It was
pressure and
mostly here's the scenario, here's our weird ass characters.
yeah,
Let's see how they bounce off of this idea, and occasionally one of
yeah,
those ideas would be furthering the group dynamics in terms of how they paired
sure,
off and so on and so
yeah, yeah.
forth. So,
Like that kind of sitcom structure is interesting to me right
hmm,
now
okay.
because I see the I'm trying to like it's not laxness. It's just like there's a certain amount of given. There's like more give to it. You're not so like in contrast, something like Breaking Bad, right, where like every episode is
Yeah,
super important to the overall story.
right.
You can't just have an episode where like Walter White is gonna like go to the arcade for like the entire episode and fuck around.
Well, your boy Ryan Johnson did that when he directed an episode. Ryan Johnson directed an episode of Breaking Bad where the entire episode is dedicated to Walt trying to kill a fly that's gotten loose in the
I
lab.
don't remember that episode.
There's an episode of Breaking Bad, I think it's in the
Is that an earlier season?
third or fourth season, I think.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
called, I think it's called The Fly, and there's a fly in the lab underneath the laundry mat. And the
That
entire
episode, though, that episode ended up paying off to something important to the overall story, though, didn't it?
did it? I don't know. I can't remember. I
I'm
don't
trying
remember it.
for some reason, I feel like there was a big reveal or something in that episode at the end
I
after
need
all
to
that.
rewatch that series, but yeah, it's not coming to my mind at the moment. But either way, at
I get
this
what you're
point,
saying, though.
at
Yeah.
this point in time, though, that's the way I remember that episode. I mean, it furthered character development, but it didn't necessarily
Yeah.
further the plot. But I
Yeah.
mean, you could argue that character development is furthering the plot because it
Right.
changes how the plot takes place or what choices are made or whatever like that. So, in in regards to wrapping up Trailer Park Warlock, because this tonight's episode is about quote unquote getting it over with, and just getting past the finish line. I'm curious, did you decide to end Trailer Park Warlock, or was it a webtoon? I can't imagine webtoon would decide that because
No, it's a decision on the part of Webtoon.
really
Yeah,
interesting.
they have and I don't entirely know why why they made the decision like they did. And it's not like they gave me a hard stop. They were just like, "Okay, we're gonna have to wrap this up." And they let me sort of negotiate with them how long that was going to be, right?
Yeah.
I think at the time when I negotiated with them, I said, yeah, I can wrap this up in about 51 episodes. And
Wow.
so, I'm actually at the point now where I'm kind of glad though, because like I feel like if the story kept going after the point where I'm going, it would lose. Like I think it would lose a lot of what's special to it for me.
Sure.
You know.
That was going to be my question. If you had said you drew the line and said, "Oh, I'm stopping here," was whether or not you had fallen out of love with
No,
it, or
I wanted to go. I wanted to go like 11 seasons. Like I had something way more sprawling and epic, and I'm realizing now that that was probably not like that probably wasn't going to work out very well
sure,
necessarily, and not because I don't think I would have written a good story, but because I think that the audience just wouldn't be along for that ride, and that was what Webtoon was deciding. Like they kind of because they see the metrics and they were looking at the metrics of it, and I think to them it was like, well, you know, this story is holding on to its audience, but it's not comparatively to other titles that they have. They have to make certain decisions as like what stays on, what goes, right?
yeah,
And I'm like, I'm on a lesser tier.
okay,
That's like something like this is kind of why I think you pick up a lot of my things about downplaying it. It's because I'm very aware of how Webtoon looks at all this stuff, and they definitely look at me as a lesser tier, or as Trailer Park Warlock as a lesser tier property on their app right now.
mm.
And that's all. It's all numerically based. It's all literally like how many people are reading it, how much revenue are they pulling from it, because they have a base amount that they spend on me per episode,
Right.
and it meets that requirement for them, but it might not be like further requirements that they have in regards to expectations on their part for how a title should perform. So does that mean like that's it with Webtoon for the future? I don't know. But I'm going to, I'll find out when I pitch them a new series. But until then, I'm going to make sure and finish this series off and make it as best as I can. And good enough that, they don't want to just like forget about it. You know what I mean? And I've talked about this before, but I think probably one of the strengths that does come with Trailer Park Warlock is that the reader base kind of returns to it a lot. So not every title's like that. And I think that kind of gives it a unique little strength.
So once you're done and finished, though, the property stays on the platform, no?
Yeah, it stays on the platform. And
so
then,
they'll see if it becomes like a quote unquote cult classic where
sure,
you know what I mean? Like viewership can, like you say, people reread and they might reread and then they might recommend to somebody new. Like the viewership might still grow despite the fact that nothing new is coming of it. And
right, and we're also like I have some contractual stuff with Webtoon where they have interest in like further pursuing like Trailer Park Warlock as like animation or whatever potentially. You know what I mean?
Awesome.
But that's
based on different metrics and
there's so many different outlining factors that relies on like how studios feel, how like all this other stuff. So anyway, that's all to say, like to a certain point, like if I've come to terms right with the fact that Trailer Park Warlock is ending, and it took me a long time to get there. And part of me coming to terms with that is also sort of being in a place of like kind of assessing it almost posthumously, where I'm like, I'm looking at it now where it's like the title's done. Even though I'm not done, I'm kind of looking at it now as the title's done so that I can better accept that. And it's not a death, it's just like that moving on.
Well, you get a chance to say goodbye. So it's like
right.
you're not going to be working on it much more. So it's like you get to kind of empty the creativity bank, really. It's like, oh, I was going to do this at some point, and that would be a really great idea. How do I make that work here? And then it's like, wow, there's some, you can paint with some big strokes.
Yeah. And what I'm feeling, too, is that sort of that creativity bank's starting to feel more and more empty by
Well,
the episode.
that was something I was going to ask you was how is it approaching the finish line? Like I would think for me in terms of like writing or telling a story, if I had a cap, right, a
Yeah.
non-self-imposed cap, if it was somebody else that was capping me, someone who could call that shot, I would feel like it would be almost a blessing in a sense that I would be like, all right, I have no time to waste. So when I look at the blank page, it's like it's less like a what can I do, which is the worst thing, versus what do I have to do? Like the to-do
Yeah.
list is in front of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
have to get this done by this point. I have to get that done so that this can happen. Like there's no wiggle room of how do I do this or what do I do first or blah blah blah. It's just more like bullet point, like bang 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 bang. Is that like what are some of the positives that you're pulling from this at the moment in terms of approaching it? Cuz like you just said you wish it was like that, but I'm curious to, or you wish the creative bank was like that, but I'm curious to know, like, is it easier to do than a normal episode, knowing that there's a finish line, 17 steps ahead of you?
It's. I have to say, I mean, it's getting a little difficult to the point where I'm like doing a lot of redrafts for writing. Like I'm doing like every episode now. I used to do just one, maybe two drafts, and now I'm doing like multiple drafts.
Wow.
And I like that it's sort of giving me this space to grow, right? Because I haven't really done this like in this process before. And I'm changing my process up a fair amount too towards this home run stretch.
Mm.
Um, but it is also difficult. I think the difficulty of it is just sort of uh, it's a little draining, and I think that's just because I've been in this marathon mode. I'm
Mm.
like I see the goal at the end, and I'm just like, and I think probably what I need to do at this point is just not focus on the goal at all. Just forget about it.
Really?
Well, just so that I can be in that mindset of like week to week, just paying attention to that and not thinking about like, oh, sooner or later this project's going to be done. If
Do
that
you
makes
have
sense.
like a do you have a roadmap planned out? Like do you
Mhm.
know what each episode is going to be?
Pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, there's a certain amount right now. There's a certain amount of wiggle room that is like probably too much wiggle room for this point of the story.
The pressure's not really on yet.
It's not that the pressure isn't really on. It's that there were certain character arcs that I hadn't fully fleshed out at the beginning of the writing process. That I'm sort of I hit this point where I'm like, okay, I need to resolve this in 3 episodes. I did not plan on this exactly, and I'm not entirely sure how this is gonna all connect,
Mm.
right? I know that it's gonna connect, and I know I'll make it connect in a way that is satisfying, but I think I hit sort of a bump on the road that, in storytelling wise, made this more complicated than I anticipated. So that also is creating a certain amount of pressure and stress. And then there's also the pressure and stress of like what happens afterward, because it's not like I have a shit ton of stuff lined up. It's like I just have to make sure that post Trailer Park Warlock period isn't just like a blank period that runs on for more than a month. You know what I mean? And so that's
Mm.
a little stressful to think about. And so I try not to think about it at all.
That's fair.
But yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think what you've been picking up from me in conversations is just a general feeling of like trying to move beyond that pressure or that stress. If that makes sense, because I
Yeah.
think that it's been grinding on me a little bit, and it's been grinding on me in the sense of like I have two countervailing or just competing emotions. One emotion is like I'm never going to be done with this. This is going to go on forever. And the other emotion is like, I don't want it to be done. What happens when it's done? You know?
Yeah.
And it creates sort of a weird it creates sort of a weird mindset, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. It's a not a hypocrisy. It's
It's a
a
paradox or something. It's like a
yes.
conundrum. It's
Right.
it's it's one of those things where I was probably happiest creating this title when I felt like I could just sort of I had all the space in the world to work on it, and I could meet the weekly deadlines because I had it set in such a way that it worked.
Hmm.
And like I said, that was the point at which I was also losing readers. So it's like I guess that didn't work.
Interesting.
That's what's really unfortunate for me because like that was when I felt the most secure. And then maybe this is just the big lesson of like don't get too secure.
Don't get too comfy doing a
Yeah,
routine and
exactly.
stuff like that. But hey, part of an artistic process is figuring out what doesn't work, right? Like you
Yeah,
have, like we all have ideas in our heads. Like this is how I'm going to do it, and then you get to do it, and then all of a sudden it don't work out the way you plan. You know what I mean? It's not hitting the way you plan. There's a million different variables that come into play, and the strength of an artist is how you bounce back, how you continue
yeah,
on, how
yeah.
you
Because you end up
problem
having to,
solve.
yeah, problem solve doing it live. Basically, that's always where you kind of those are the galvanizing moments, right? That's where
Sink
you
or
kind of
swim.
get. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where I am right now. I'm in the sink or swim moment. And I'll have more of a sink or swim moment right after Trailer Park Warlock as well. So
But I mean,
that will be interesting.
in your mind, are you just like, I don't want to say given up because that's not the right way to describe it, but are you resolved to the idea that chances are, like Game of Thrones and everything before it, there will be disappointment with how you wrap this up?
Oh yeah.
And
How
you've
I
made
mean,
peace with that, or are you fighting to still try to make it the best, or are you just
I'm
focused
fighting
in
to
on
make it
making
the
yourself happy? Like, what's your angle?
I'm fighting on making it the best. I just think that I think it's inevitable that there are going to be things I'm going to look back on because I've seen it with everything else that I've done, right?
Sure.
Where I'm just like, oh, I could have done that better. I could have done this better. I think that's an unavoidable thing, Like I'm sure, every big director or whoever, they if they ever rewatch their films, and a lot of people don't rewatch their films for this reason too. So they don't like have to deal with that disappointment. A
I
lot of
feel
actors do that.
I feel like you're fishing after watching. Did you see my Instagram story?
No, did you just was it just recently posted?
Within the last day or so, probably last night.
I'm trying to remember what you're talking about. I might have. Please
Where I'm
describe it to
I'm
me.
recutting digits.
Oh shit, I didn't know about that.
Yeah. I feel like I thought you were fishing to bring this up
No,
in the
I had no
conversation.
fucking idea. I had no idea.
No. So I don't know if I ever told you about this, but when we were filming Digits, I was the one man band. I was the camera operator, director, cinematographer. Sometimes I was trying to figure out how to be the, location sound, the whole nine yards. First AC. I was every crew position. And there was one particular thing on the camera. We didn't have lights. Like we didn't have like lights to do it. And there's a button on the camera called the gain, which in modern day would have been pretty much the same thing as an ISO on a DSLR. And basically what that does to anyone who's not listening or that doesn't know who's listening, you can change the ISO in low light conditions and it can get a better exposure on your image. The caveat is that it puts this like grainy, noisy, like pixelated effect on everything. And I would flip that on in our night scenes. We had a fair amount of night scenes or darkly lit areas or whatever, to get a better exposure. And it would make a grainy, ugly looking image. And it was just something that I had to do. I wasn't pleased with it. And then on top of that, I would be so exhausted after a long night shoot that I would forget that the switch was on. And we would go shoot a day thing, and that grain would still be there, but I wouldn't notice it because the monitor on the camera was so small. So I would have gain on normal daylight scenes, and it was just terrible. Well, I was doing some experiments last night. There was a super moon, and I was doing some camera tests with my drone and my new camera, and I was trying to figure out what exposure levels I could get and how good the lens would work and this and that. Long story short, the drone was a complete disaster. The drone's just not going to work at night, period. It's not designed for that. It's not high grade enough for that. It's not going to happen. I'm going to have to abandon a couple of shots that I had in mind. Not a big deal. I thought, after discovering something, there is modern technology, thank God, that can denoise video. And it's relatively easy. Nice. It cost me $75. I downloaded a demo thing of it. And what I was going to do on the drone was jack up the ISO, and because I knew it wasn't going to perform great in low light. Jack up the ISO and then bring it in and denoise it and see how it looked. No go. It wasn't even getting exposure at the highest ISO. However, I realized I can denoise all of those digit shots that annoyed the shit out of me. And furthermore, I have technology now that is much better designed, the software, to attack some of the technical issues that I had on digits that I was never happy with, like post-production sound and stuff like that. Furthermore, I watched digits maybe once every 5 years, which was the point that I thought you were getting at. Rarely watch it. Rarely. But when I do, most of the time I'm surprised at how well it came out, where I'm just like, oh, that's actually pretty funny. I forgot about that. Oh, that was a good cut. I did that right. Yeah. There's a few moments where I'm just like, yeah, I didn't need that. Oh, I waited a hair too long. Nope, that's slowing the pace down. Like, I could do these different. So I thought to myself, I'm like, well, Haunted is a little bit on delay right now. What can I do to keep myself growing, developing in my free time? Because, I watch my son during the day. Not a whole lot of room to run around with a camera and get camera tests or makeup tests and all that kind of shit. But I can park myself in front of a computer and I can re-edit digits. I have all the material, obviously. And I thought to myself, well, back then I only submitted it to one film festival, and it was like up there, like Cannes Film Festival, and they weren't fucking accepting digits. But what if I resubmitted digits to other film festivals? I'm not caring about necessarily winning. What if I can get digits shown and get my name out there, and maybe someone will say, hey, you did a good job directing that, or that was a really good editor, blah, 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 blah. Maybe I can get something out of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm going back to that well. It's odd that we were bringing this up because you're talking about crossing the finish line. I've crossed the finish line, and I'm like, I'm going to go back to the start, and I'm going to start over.
Well, what you're saying is really serendipitous, too, because I'm actually thinking about resubmitting.
Garage Raja?
Well, like, I have all these PDFs that I did of Garage Raja that I just have sitting in a Google Drive, and there's a new platform that's come up called Global Comics, and they're kind of like Comixology, which is like a digital platform for releasing comics, but they do a couple of different things that I really like. Can't do any of that with Trailer Park Warlock, but I have Garage Raja and I have Bat Monster, and I look at that and go, oh, well, potential new audience to put it in front of, and who knows, maybe there'll be more traction.
You did, correct me if I'm wrong, you did try putting Bat Monster on Webtoons, no?
It was on it's still on Webtoon, and people who find Trailer Park Warlock inevitably go to subscribe to it and read it, I guess. Some of them read it, and then others just kind of look at it and go, what the fuck is this about? But like, it's on there, and I'm going to keep an eye.
The point I was going to make was, though, it would be very interesting to me if you put Bat Monster on a different platform and it blew up.
That's what I'm curious about it, because Webtoon might have not been the platform, but maybe this one would be, because it's a little more indie sort of centered, I guess.
Yeah, because that's kind of like the way I'm looking at redoing digits with stuff, because nobody makes comedies like I did in 2011. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like that's a different the form of comedy. Shit, I can't tell you the last fucking comedy that I saw in a movie theater. When's the last time they put out a comedy?
They
Seriously,
tried. I mean, they kind of tried this year
the
with
most
that dog
notable one that I can,
story.
the only one I can think of that was any kind of hit was the not super bad, but it was about the three like kindergartner kids,
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I don't remember what it was called
and that
though.
they swore and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
they were
yeah,
like
yeah.
doing drugs. Like that was the closest to a comedy that I'd seen in the theaters in a long time.
Oh,
Like
the
they
only other
really
thing this year was Jackass.
okay. That's not a narrative
Yeah.
though. You know what I mean? Like I'm talking
Yeah.
like narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
can't
know
think.
exactly what you're saying though. They have one that's coming out. I don't know if you've seen the trailers for it. It's like it's like the LGBTQ museum or whatever, and you haven't seen it?
Oh, I saw like an advertisement for it. I didn't watch it where it was like, "Hey, bro," or it's like some stupid title like that or something.
It's very much reminiscent of like a Judd Apatow style comedy.
Mm,
It's very like, the single gay guy, he wants to meet somebody again, whatever. And something about this museum, right? I don't know. It's probably going to be, antics ensue, blah,
yeah,
blah, blah, right?
right.
But hey, it's a comedy, so I hope it does well so we can see more fucking comedies,
Yeah, think about that. Everything now is like an action or drama. When I say action, I mean superhero movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Superhero movies, drama, and horror. And don't get me
Yeah,
wrong, I love those three
for sure.
genres, but like there is a severe absence in legitimate comedy films. And
For sure.
I think a lot of that comes down to a lot of studios are afraid to get canceled or have backlash for a joke, like a single joke in their movie going and pissing off somebody, and then the whole movie is like protested.
Well,
So,
and it's weird though because like companies like YouTube and Netflix at this point now kind of are being buoyed by comedians and by comedy like
yeah,
specials and stuff like that. Like there's a sincere thirst for like watching something that's funny. And I grew up in the 90s on like shit like Wayne's World or Austin Powers, like just silly dumb comedy
yeah.
movies that are just fun to watch. And like I kind of I'm with you where I kind of miss them. Or like a
Digits is
good stoner
definitely,
comedy.
yeah, Digits is definitely not in that vein. Digits is more in the Judd Apatow meets The Office kind
Yeah,
of
but
like
those
it's
are
a halfway
needed
between
too,
those two.
right? Like that's like our like fucking like Clerks and Clerks 2, stuff like
True.
that, like Kevin Smith movies. And I think there's such an interesting range that you can do with comedy movies. There was another thing I was going to say too, which is that here's the other thing is like platforms, like all the streaming platforms, they all like other than their original content, they all just regurgitate all the same stuff,
Yeah.
right? It's literally the whole catalog of everything that's been made thus far. And like I think at a certain point people sort of hit a wall with it.
Mm.
And are hitting a wall with like the original content too. Like Netflix is pulling back hard on like their original content.
Yeah.
Like they're sticking to like a lot of the reality TV show stuff, but like all their big budget, like, you know, they had I can't even think of names because they had so many different like, like Ozarks and stuff like that. They had so many different
Yeah.
series going on all at once that like, um, there's no way that they were gonna like make all those ends financially meet. And the same thing's going on with like Amazon Prime and Apple TV and all that stuff where
Well,
it's
I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that the other studios that they were sourcing material from are now pulling back because they have their own streaming services. So it's like
yeah,
we need a library of content to
yeah.
back us up. So it was like let's throw everything against the wall. But now that they found a
And
few things that stick, they've
yeah,
spaced things out. Okay, Cobra Kai here, Stranger Things here,
yeah,
more Cobra Kai here.
yeah.
Then we'll do something else here.
And on top of that too is you have other platforms coming out now that are literally just free cable TV.
Hmm.
Like you get like Pluto TV. There's another one that I just found out called Freevee, I think.
Oh, I
It's
didn't
literally
hear
the
that. I
same.
thought you were
It's
gonna
the
say
same.
Tubi.
No, it's literally the same thing where it's just like we've got all these. We've got this giant back catalog of shows that we can just stream for free, and when we make money on the commercial ads.
Yeah.
So you watch it like you would regular TV. We've just gone full circle to where we're back to cable television at this point.
Right.
But I'm saying all this to ultimately try and connect this together into. I think that at this point, you have to get back to basics with new stuff, with new movies, new art, and that means you have to go back into the well of like putting stuff out there that is not just like safe, clean, like easy to digest sort of television because people are getting tired of that
Did you
basically.
watch? It's not necessarily a comedy special, but it's like a stand-up documentary thing. It's a new Dave Chappelle thing, where he talks to the school where they were trying to name the theater department after him, and
Okay, I hadn't
it
seen
was
this.
it was in the height. It's called What's in a Name, and it was in the height of the backlash from his stand-up special, The Closer, where there were lots of trans activists that were going after him about the content that he was there. And he speaks for about a good 40 minutes about the importance of artists to push boundaries, to for artistic nuance. And he made an amazing point at one point. He was like, if you saw in a newspaper headline, man shot in the face with a shotgun by 6-foot rabbit, that would be pretty crazy. Like, you would be
Right.
like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Like, if you took that serious and you were like, holy shit. And then if someone was like, no, that's a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you've
Yeah.
removed the context in
Yeah.
which this was taking place.
Yeah.
So, he talks about the importance of artistic freedom, integrity, pushing boundaries, being intentionally provocative with thoughts and ideas on a stage that necessarily aren't being presented, not falsely, but just they're being presented for the sake of being presented, and to not trigger your mind, but to at least, somebody has to say it in a certain way. Challenge. Yeah. So that you as a person can say, well, how do I feel about this? Am I taking this seriously, or am I understanding it's a joke? Does that change my whole point of view about something? Like, you have to, and that's like the responsibility of artists in terms of culture and society.
Dude,
And
I don't know how
100%
many people,
agreed with him.
I don't know how many people I've talked to. Not that I've talked to that many people, but I see a lot of people who I would think of as sort of rabid art people who have totally disconnected, myself included, from a lot of like the big media stuff that's going on right now because it's just like not interesting. It doesn't. I don't feel like. I'm just speaking for myself right now, but like I'm also mirroring a lot of the things that people are saying to me, which is like I don't feel like I'm being challenged intellectually. I feel like I'm either being talked down to or I'm being told what I want to hear,
One of those two, absolutely.
And none of that makes me feel comfortable at all. And I think that's why, like I find
Wow.
myself gravitating to a lot of comedy stuff, right? Because that's where people are kind of like messing around with things and pushing boundaries where they can. And
Being authentic. Good or
yeah,
bad.
well,
Good or bad, they're being authentic.
going back to last week's episode regarding Atlanta, like Atlanta, I felt like, as a show was just really, really pushing back in every direction.
Yep.
To provoke, to make you think about the topics, to not just make you feel comfortable with what was going on. Like, it was so interesting to watch like reactions to the reparations episode because like And all the reactions were mostly like, I didn't see any reactions from white guys, but it was all like in the black community, and they were all like, it was across the board. Like everybody had a lot of different thoughts about what they thought about it, and I was like, oh, they did their job right.
Mm.
They did not just, it wasn't just like one thing being said to everybody. It was like, we want you to think about this from as many angles as possible. Empathize with this white guy.
Yeah.
Also empathize with yourself, right? You know, like, how do you feel, right, in this situation? How would you feel about this person, seeing them go through this?
Mm.
And that to me is art at its strongest. Art really challenging people to not just look at things from their own perspective, but to really go outside it and to, you know, look at somebody's perspective that you would never normally do. And that's, I think, severely missing right now on a lot of stuff. Where to the point where sometimes to me it just feels like, you know, it feels like propaganda almost.
Absolutely. And that's the way I see it as well. But to me, I get excited thinking about that because to me as an artist, not only, well, I guess only being able to observe that and understand that what you just articulated is a opportunity in my mind for me to stand out above the noise, the pollution, the crowd, whatever you want to define it as, because, you know, there are so many people who just want to be filmmakers, and every single one of them, and so many that I deal with on a local level too, are of the mind. It's just kind of like when you see a TV trope and someone's like, oh, the clown has a big nose and he stepped on a foot and he's got big shoes and that's why people stepped on his foot. Like that kind of like cliche type shit is now the things that are cliche now is activism in entertainment. Do you know what I mean? Like the representation thing and how this is this. And to me, it's so fucking boring. And maybe it's because I'm a white guy and I just don't see it and I don't experience it and stuff like that. But I can't imagine. I know people want to be represented in media and story, and I totally understand that. But I can't imagine you want to go to a movie or flip on a TV show and be like, that's exactly what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Like, stories in a way are supposed to be two things. One, an escapism from our day-to-day life, because day-to-day life is actually pretty boring for most of us. And secondly, they should be universal lessons on how to approach problems in life. And I mean universal problems. There is, I know I talked about this on a couple of podcasts ago, or an episodes ago. There's a new podcast I'm watching called Boy Meets World, or Pod Meets World, about the television show Boy Meets World. And they're rewatching past episodes, and just for the sake of it, I'm rewatching Boy Meets World with them to do it. And they talked about, and they were very right on the money here, there's an episode called Father Knows Less, in which the father of the family, Alan Matthews, has to ditch his son from going to the Blue Angels, which is an airplane show, because he's got a work problem. And when he comes home that night, he makes it up to him by going upstairs and waking him up and bringing him downstairs and said, hey, let's watch the end of the Phillies game. And it's like late night. So they have a father-son bonding experience. And Corey goes to school the next day and he falls asleep and he fails a test. And Mr. Feeney will not let him take a retest. So Alan, the dad, goes to Mr. Feeney, who lives behind them next door to their house, and says, hey, it was my fault. I missed this thing with him and I wanted to make it up to him. I wanted to spend father-son time with him. Can you let him take a retest? And Mr. Feeney still says no. Like, I can't do that. I can't give him special privilege and this and that. They're presenting two ideas, and this is what they articulated in the episode, two ideas, neither of which is wrong. It's important for a father to spend time with his son and to make up for mistakes and transgressions. It's also important that a young boy be held to academic standards equally as the rest of the class, and you know what I mean? Like, sure. And the show never takes an actual position on which one is right. And by the end of it, both the dad is saying, you know, it was wrong what I did. I shouldn't have woken you up. I should have made sure you got a good night's sleep before school. And Mr. Feeney is on the other side and goes, I should let you take the retest because it's important for you to spend time with your father. And you know what I mean? Like the whole time, like you don't really understand like which one's the clear-cut right one here.
Yeah.
I love things like that. They don't do that now. You know what I mean? It's
Not
very
as
clearly
much.
it's
Yeah.
very clearly in most media these days like, oh, these guys are the bad guys. There's no nuance to antagonists anymore. You look at things like Spider-Man 2. Remember, like in the first movie, in the very first Spider-Man, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is crazy and evil, period. There's very little nuance going on there. Then you come to Spider-Man 2. The reason why everybody said Spider-Man 2 is so much better is because they take Doc Ock and they make you empathize with him. They're like, oh, I understand why he's doing this. Like, he's crazy, but I understand why. They don't do that anymore. Like, it's just always very mustache twirling. Keep, compartmentalize the viewpoint from everything else, which is an interesting artistic approach, but at the same time, you're painting with very broad strokes where it's just like there's no nuance anymore. And that's what that's what I personally am hating in movies and TV these days.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying, and it's what causes me to want to look at more older media for sure.
Well, there's definitely propaganda in there.
Oh yeah. I mean, fucking what did I watch the other day? No, I mean a lot of old 90s action movies. Even though I will say like Die Hard with a Vengeance, like even Die Hard with a Vengeance manages to be more like nuanced in its takes about like race relations in America and like does it it does it in a way that I think is very appropriate for the 90s, but also very like keeps it within the realm of the character. And doesn't try and like make it go outside of that, where it's like you feel like the movie's staring at you as an audience member, which I think that's part of the problem, right? Is like people feel like they're being stared at by the writers and directors, and it's like, who made these fucking writers and directors like moral authorities on anything?
Yeah. I mean, there's an expectation that an artist, whether they be writer, director, or whatever, has thematic premise, like they have an argument that they're presenting to you. Yeah. In my opinion, it's just that they're not presenting it well. They're presenting it by ignoring other contributing factors and not acknowledging them. They're dehumanizing the other viewpoint, which is what we loved about Atlanta, was that it didn't do that. It didn't dehumanize necessarily the antagonists and stuff. And there's like, I know you haven't watched it yet, and this is going to be the next thing that I'm going to hound you to watch, but Midnight Mass on Netflix is one of the best things of the last decade in my opinion. And it's just a single, 6-episode miniseries. And you watch it and you're like, okay, it's this horror thing about, I won't spoil it. But there's also like these competing ideas about like what is good. How can you take a good thing like religion, and I say this as an agnostic, a good thing like religion, and use it to justify anything you want it to. Like if you dig deep enough in the Bible, you can twist the words to be a weapon for you to justify literally anything. And that's literally like one of the beautiful things about it, because it's the same way the law works, right? In the United States, they write laws to be vague so they can be interpreted by the courts, by judges, by juries, by lawyers, etc., to present different arguments. And that nuance is what creates like problems in terms of like how people get off, in terms of whether or not they're prosecuted or not. It's very clear he shot the guy. That's not the point, though. The point is, why did he shoot the guy? Oh, well, he was self-defense, or the guy was unarmed. It doesn't matter. It's those nuances where it comes in. But when you come to movies and TV these days, they don't present that nuance. They don't present those alternative contributing details. And that's why we're sitting there going, all right, I'm being preached to. Someone's trying to brainwash me. and I'm not playing it. But if the writer or director or whoever will acknowledge the viewpoint of the person that we're supposed to be rooting against, I have more trust in that artist, that storyteller, to come out the other side of not trying to brainwash me, but to challenge me, as we talked about, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So let's tie that back to wrapping things up as we wrap things up here. Is there anything that you want to talk about in terms of wrapping up Trailer Park Warlock that you are trying to infuse in these last episodes? Is there some kind of takeaway that you are trying to pull off, an artistic intent, I should say?
I think that's part of the problem for me right now is I'm so focused on wrapping up the story overall that there isn't like that much room to like do all that. And I kind of felt like I got to do that earlier, And at this point, all I can really do to a certain extent is just either reframe or reiterate the points made previously.
Interesting.
And that's okay. I mean, that is what it is in the sense of you kind of have to do that when you're at that denouement stage, where you're at that stage where you wrap things up. Like you don't want to introduce entirely new concepts right at the very end. You kind of want to just give space for people to chew on and like I said, like kind of either reframe, all the statements you made previously, or give it, some kind of final context that wasn't there before. So, I mean, I have to say, like, I think that's probably part of the reason why endings can be a little disappointing to write, because it's like, oh, there isn't a new venue I can go down anymore. I have to like really just nail this thing down. So
fair enough. All right. Well, we're not going to take 17 episodes to get to the end of this one. We're going to wrap it up, and we will see you guys next week. Take care.
Bye, all.